Judit Polgar has been in the news recently. Last week, she was offered the presidency of Hungary. Yes, you heard it. Not the presidency of the Hungarian Chess Federation, but the presidency of Hungary, full stop. And she declined, which I have to say does her great credit. Polgar called the request for her to stand as president the greatest honour of her life. But, and I quote, she felt she didn't have enough strength within her to take on the historic responsibility of uniting a divided nation. Now, Hungary has been through difficult times over the past few years with the authoritarian regime of Viktor Orban, who has recently been voted out, and Peter Magyar is the new prime minister. And, well, hopefully things will settle down, it'll stabilise, and, well, who knows, maybe in a few years' time, once Hungary finds some stability, maybe Judit would take on that role. I have to say, I think she'd be brilliant. She has a strong moral compass. She has great diplomatic ability. She's used to mixing on the world stage at the highest levels. She feels very comfortable there, and she doesn't put a foot wrong, actually. So who knows? In a few years' time, we'll see. Now, the other reason Judit has been in the news is because she has just celebrated her 50th birthday, and I think we should celebrate that too. She is a remarkable and unique figure in the chess world. First of all, because of her playing career, which was absolutely brilliant, and I want to show you some brilliant games by her very soon. And she continues to inspire people with her regular online commentary and with her Chess Connects Global Festival. So, I want to show you a few snippets from her games that demonstrate her fantastic ability to attack. And I'm going to show one game in particular there where I was actually commentating and witnessed it live, which was really remarkable. So, without further ado, let's look at some brilliant chess from Judit Polgar. Let me show you a few brilliant finishes from Judit Polgar. Now, this first game was played in the Thessaloniki Olympiad in 1988. So Polgar would have been 12 years old. And of course, there were all these rumours about the Polgar sisters and how brilliant they were. But this was, one of the first events when we saw Judit in action on the world stage. And this was a crushing victory. So this particular pawn sacrifice in the Rossolimo actually has a really good reputation for white. And Polgar so comfortable in giving up material for the initiative. So that pin is already really annoying. The pawn on e5 claims space. And it's such a fun position for white to play. I've had great success with this particular sacrifice. So Polgar's a pawn down, but you can see she is so active here. And of course, with black's pieces on the queen side still on their starting blocks, this is already losing, must be losing. And the game finished like this. This was a bit of a catastrophe for black. So queen h6, threatening bishop f6, and the game finished like this. Queen f5, and queen takes rook, and black resigned. Of course, if king takes, then bishop h6, and rook e8 mate. Wow, devastation. So you can see how the Polgar sisters created shockwaves at this time. Okay, let's move on. So I want to show you this game. Now, this was actually a masterful strategic performance by Polgar. This was against Anand from Vaikanze in 1998. I'll have to show you the full game another time, but this is just the finish of the game. So you can see that Polgar has this beautiful knight on d5, shutting out black's major pieces, and now she moves in for the kill. So Anand has just blocked with the bishop. f4. This was taken. Rook h8. And that was actually the final move of the game. Now, why did Anand resign? Well, it's a beautiful conclusion to the game. Because if king g7, queen d4 check, bishop blocks, and now queen takes, rook h7, and white is a piece up with a winning endgame. And that little tactic there, little sequence is so typical of Polgar. You know, she sees these kind of sequences so quickly. She's so sharp. Great finisher. Brilliant game. I'll have to show that another time. Okay, and what about this game? I've shown this game on the channel before, actually, against Mamedyarov. And it's incredible how she has the ability to crush very strong players so easily. So this was played in 2002, again at the Olympiad, but in Bled. And Polgar finished with knight c5 check. That's a discovered attack here. Bishop takes, queen f7. That's better than taking the queen immediately. King d6, bishop e7. And I think actually Mamedyarov resigned here because, well, if knight takes, then rook takes and black collapses. And if king d5, queen f3, and b3 is checkmate. Wow. To defeat such a strong player as Mamedyarov in that fashion is quite incredible. And finally, this was from the Olympiad in Tromsø in 2014. And, well, Polgar is playing someone rated way below her. But she got into trouble, but she really gambled in trying to win this game. And it paid off. Because at this point, white blundered with this move. And again, Judith's tactical eye is so sharp. Maybe I should give you this as a think and drink moment. Black to play. What would you do next? Do you want to improve your chess? Get access to live masterclasses with yours truly? Then subscribe to patreon.com/PowerPlayChess, and for just $25 a month, you get a newsletter with a test game, calculation puzzles, a monthly opening survey, access to an archive with over 100 opening surveys. And you can join in live masterclasses exclusive to patrons where you can ask me questions directly over Zoom. All for only $25 per month. Do subscribe to patreon.com/PowerPlayChess and join the club. This one isn't too difficult, but it is very sweet. So the game finished like this. Polgar took the bishop, king takes, queen d2 check. And I love the geometry of this actually. King back, queen h6, and queen h3. Wow. Beautiful crossfire there with the bishop controlling these squares. Checkmate. That's how the game ended. Wonderful. And the game that I'd like to show you in its entirety and finish with is Judit Polgar playing white against Nigel Short. Now this was played in the PCA Intel Grand Prix tournament in New York in 1994. Now I was commentating live on this game. This was played in Manhattan. I was commentating with Maurice Ashley. We had great fun during those PCA Grand Prix rapid play events. And the players played a knockout tournament with 2-game matches. And Judith had already won the first game with black against Nigel Short, so she only needed a draw here. But typically, she absolutely went for it with white. Let me show you what happened. So e4, remember, Nigel was in a must-win situation. Played the French. Okay, it's a double-edged opening, and knight f6, the classical variation, which personally I like very much for black. And here, probably the most popular move is f4 and knight f3. Well, recently I showed you a game that Levon Aronian won in Biel with this line. But Judit goes for knight e2. That's a very old move. The point is that after c5, you can protect the pawn on d4 with a pawn on c3, which is a good idea. You know, it really tries to shut black out, but it does leave a bit of a bottleneck here. And f4. So it's a really ambitious way for white to play, and typical of Judit actually. Now you might recall from the Gukesh Ding World Championship match in 2024 that Ding played a5 in this position. That's certainly not a bad way to play, gaining space. Short exchanged on d4 and then played f5. So he's trying to close the position on the king side. So, you know, one of white's big strategic aims here ultimately is to push forward with f5. And so black prevents that. And, well, if this is exchanged, then black gets a lot of freedom and, you know, that square could be useful. And that pawn on f4 doesn't look great. Just blocking in the bishop. But there is a problem with f5. And we're about to see what the problem is. So knight b6. So basically black is looking to play on the queen side. Whoops, not that. But with bishop here and rook c8, and yeah, get some play on these squares on the queen side. I suppose the old way to play here was, well, the standard way is to play the knight here and bishop d3 and you get castled, and ultimately you want to break with g4. Put the king in the corner, rook g1, g4. That takes some time. I mean, you could say that the king would be very safe, very secure on h1, but look at the way Polgar plays. She's not messing about. She just plays h3, and in this position, just goes g4. Now, this is definitely the break you want. You want to try and open up the g-file and use your space on the king side. But it does leave the king in the middle. But it's so typical of Judit. You know, a first thought is attack. But this is pretty risky because it allows bishop h4 check. So already that is a bit embarrassing for the king. Do you really want to step over this way to the queen side? I mean, that is probably the best way for white to play, actually. But Polgar took on h4, which brings black's queen into play. Now, this is a very ambitious move because you want to exchange off that dark squared bishop, but it leaves black's queen attacking. And short went in with queen f2. Now, at this point, remember, I mean, the crowd, there's a big crowd in the tournament hall, were going wild. They couldn't believe what they were seeing. Short with black playing for a win. He was in a must-win situation. And this was a gift for him. Suddenly, he's attacking with his queen. This pawn is vulnerable. There's a knight coming in here. And what is Polgar doing? Running around with the king. Now, she could have compromised here. She could have chased a queen exchange with queen b3 and queen g3. And there's no doubt she has compensation there just because she has two bishops. But no, typically, she just played b3 and allowed short to take on d4 and then played king c3. So she's looking for a home on b2. Now, it's at this moment that black has a really strong continuation. What do you play here? I'll have a little drink. You have a think. I'm not going to pour. I'm not going to have another insert video, but what would you play as black here? Okay, cheers. Short was too greedy here. Now remember, this is a rapid play game. In a classical game, I think Short would have won this without any difficulty. The best continuation is to play knight f3. And that combination of queen and knight just ties up white's pieces. So, for example, after this, check, and knight d5, this is looking pretty good for black with that knight, the second knight stepping in. But instead, Short grabbed the rook. Well, it's understandable. But this position isn't so clear anymore. So he gave a check. Now it looks like, white's pieces are just way out of action somehow. These pieces are on the back rank. Actually, for a start, these pieces are pretty well placed. They're ready to step forward very easily. The knight is a beautiful blockader. The only piece which isn't in play is the rook on a1. And after this next move, I was sure that Judit was going to win. She played a4. Now, this isn't about pushing this knight. Who cares about that? I mean, there is sort of a threat to push it and then take here, but that's not the real point. Short played a5, rook a2. That's the point. And suddenly, all white's pieces are in play. The rook swung across to the king side. The queen has to step out. Exchange on f5, bishop b2, queen is pushed back. And look at white's pieces. Just within the space of a handful of moves, there's been a complete transformation. That rook was doing nothing on a1. Suddenly it's on the open file, pointing down to the enemy king. And that bishop is raking across the board. It's completely winning for black. I mean, the crowd was going absolutely wild at this point with every blow. Knight f6 from Short, knight takes f5 played. Now, if that's taken, you don't actually have to take here. You play queen d4, and that is an absolute crusher. And that really is decisive. And if rook e5, well, lots of ways to win. You can play f5. This is a sweet move. Queen g1. And, well, with these two threats, basically. Well, bishop takes rook is the threat. And then breaking through on g6. And, well, for example, after this, rook takes. And this leads to mate. Beautiful mate. Bishop a3. This is why Polgar was so keen to take that dark squared bishop, because it means that that dark squared bishop has no opponent. Wonderful. And that is checkmate. That didn't happen in the game. Rook g6 was played. Bishop e5. Knight takes g7. f5. Exchange on g2. Now you can see with that pawn on e6, the bishop cannot get into play. And that means this rook is stuck. Queen h5, that's a really cool move. You did recognise that she can exchange queens, and even though she's the exchange down, she wins the endgame very, very easily. Because this bishop is completely dead. Game ended like this, bishop d5, an absolute killer, threatening e7 and e8, and there is no good defense there. It was a wonderful game, and as you can imagine, the crowd went absolutely loopy at the end of that. Judit, let me see, in 1994, she was 18 years old, around about 18, I think, when this game was played. And, well, already you can see her rating is already 2630, so she was already, very high up in world rankings, but she plays and played at that time with such flair. It was fantastic to see. So I wish Judit a very happy 50th birthday, and long may she continue to play such a wonderful role in the chess world.